Today we'll be taking a look at Windows Virtual Desktop and the new Windows Virtual Desktop Admin Portal experience that has been recently introduced. So if you recall in our earlier videos, we displayed how to deploy Azure Windows Virtual Desktop, and there's quite a few complications and things that you have to do to prepare for that. So a lot of that has been greatly simplified. You no longer need to host your own web application for the management. And all of these things have been fully integrated natively into that Windows Azure portal. So let's go ahead and get started. So here we are, we're sitting on the Azure portal. And the first thing we want to do, we want to just go and validate that we have access to the service. So make sure that it's registered and available as a resource for us to consume. So the first thing you want to do in the Azure portal, you want to go ahead and click on the hamburger button, and then you want to go to all services. Once you're in all services, you can go ahead and search for the word subscription and click on subscriptions, and then go into your designated subscription. So once you're in your subscription, you want to scroll down and find the resource providers entry. Once you click on resource providers, so once you're in this view, you want to go ahead and search for the word desktop, and then you should see something named Microsoft Desktop Virtualization. So if that's not currently registered, what you want to do is just simply click on it and then click register to get it activated and available for you to consume. So now we want to just hop back over to all services, and now we want to search for Windows Virtual Desktop. Here we go. So once you find the Windows Virtual Desktop entry, go ahead and click on that. And then that brings you over to this new experience that's available now. So here, the first thing you want to do, we want to go ahead and create a host pool. So I'll click create a host pool. And here you want to designate a resource group to house all of your resources. So I'll just go ahead and create a new one. And this new one I will name, let's say WVD Dev Environment. What we'll name this resource group. Say OK. And then we want to give it a host pool name. So for this, I'll name it LTV-WVD Dev. And then we want to select a location. So this will be the Azure region where you want it to be deployed. So as you can see, there's not all Azure regions are currently supported, but over time, additional regions will be added. So for my case, I'm going to go ahead and select the North Central US Azure region. And then you see down here at the bottom, there's a note that says the metadata will be stored in Azure geography associated with North Central US. So just keep in mind, so if you have any like data sovereignty issues, just make sure you're storing those configurations in the appropriate place. All right, so we'll go ahead and do North Central US. And then we have the option of choosing host pool type. So for host pool types, you have two different options. So you can either do personal or pool. The main difference is that when you select a personal, what that means is as a host or as a session host come online, it can be assigned and dedicated and designated for an individual user. And then the pool model is where multiple users can share the same session host and log into that. So in most cases, from a cost and just an operational standpoint, most people will probably go with the pool option. So I'll go with the pool. And then once you have the pool, you designate what's the max number of users you want per session host that you deploy. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to allow up to 20 users per host. That may be you may need more or less, just depending on how large you want to size your VMs that you choose to deploy in your environment. So your mileage may vary on what number you want to put here. And then next thing you want to do is you need to select a load balancing algorithm. And you have two choices here, breadth or depth. The main difference there is the breadth scenario is that say if you have 3 session hosts, so the first user that comes in will hit host 1, the second user will hit host 2, third user will hit host 3, and then it'll start over and go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? And in the depth model, what that'll do, it will load up that whole first 20 users will all be loaded onto that first host until it fills up, and then it'll move on to the second host and start loading that up. So just depending on how you want to load have your user load spread across the systems, you pick the appropriate choice. So for me, I'm going to choose breadth first. So I want to spread that load across all my available hosts once I select them. And now I just want to go next. So here we have an option to actually add the virtual machines right here and there right in the wizard. So I'm going to just go ahead and say yes. And you see here right at the top, as far as the resource groups, you see it's going to default to the same as the host pool, or you can optionally place them in their own separate resource group if you have that desire. So for mine, I'm going to leave it in the same host pool. Again, we select our virtual machine location. So our virtual machines don't have to reside in the same location that we're deploying our initial like workspace and basics environment. So our virtual machines can be in any region. So you can see here, once you get here, it opens up and it gives us options to deploy of any of the available Azure regions that your particular subscription have access to. So for my case, I'm still going to leave it in North Central US. Next up, we have an option of selecting our virtual machine size. So by default, it'll give you a D2 V3 with 2 vCPUs and 8 GB of memory. So that small of a system obviously probably won't be enough for 20 users. So you could size it larger, but just for purposes of showing you this, I'm going to just leave it as is. Next up, we'll select the number of VMs that we actually want to deploy right now. So here, just simply type how many virtual machines you want to deploy. So in that example I gave, I said like if we had 3 VMs here, it would spread that load across all 3 VMs. I'm only going to deploy 2. And then here we give the prefix for all the session hosts we're going to deploy. So what this will do, so say if I name my prefix is LTV-WVDN, what this will do is it will, every VM that gets provisioned by this, it will be named LTV-WVDN, then it'll tag on a -1, -2, etc. on the end as additional VMs are added into the environment. Next up, we have an option for image type. So we can deploy image from the gallery, or we can store an image of our own that we've prepared that we have stored in a storage blob somewhere. For my purposes, I'm just going to use an image from the gallery. So from the gallery, you have 3 basic options in the main drop down here. So you have Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session. It will be Windows 1909 release. Or you can do Windows 10 Multi-Session version 1909, including Office 365 Pro Plus. And finally, you have the option for deploying a Windows Server 2019 Data Center image as well. So for my purpose, I'm actually going to go with the Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session that includes Office 365 Pro Plus. Next up, we select the type of disk that we want to use. So by default, it will go to standard SSD, but you still have the option of using premium SSD or standard HDD, just depending on which one you want to use. So really in a production environment, you probably really should be using SSD, especially if you're going to have like 20, 30 users or something like that on a single host. If you go with standard HDD, I mean, it'll work, but the performance and response time having that many users using like standard HD may not be the best experience for the user. But your mileage may vary depending on the behaviors of the apps that you deploy and how the end users ultimately use the applications and the desktop that they'll be accessing. So for us, me, since this is just going to be a dev environment, I'm going to use standard HDD. And then you see here down here at the bottom, it's grayed out. You don't get a choice when you're going through the wizard, but by default, it's going to use manage disk. So it doesn't give you an option to actually change that in this current template. And if you're not familiar with the advantage of using management disk, especially as you're deploying multiple VMs, under the covers, it will try to ensure that where all your disks ultimately aren't stored on the same fault domain. So for example, if the disk that's backing VM1 or your session host 1 will be on one data stack, and then the ones for data 2 may be on a different one, just in case. So if one of them has a problem, it won't bring down the whole environment when you use managed disk. Without managed disk, it's kind of a crapshoot. You don't have any control of where that is, so it may or may not end up on the same data stamp without using managed disk. And then it can introduce you to additional failure opportunities and environmental faults. All right, so moving on, the next thing here we need to select the virtual network where we want it to deploy to. So this virtual network would have to already exist. So you'll just go through, depending on what environment, which region you're pointing to, it will enumerate the virtual networks that you have deployed in your environment. So in my case, I'm going to go with my Red Core subnet network that I already have predefined. Have an option of saying if you want to use a public IP or not on those VMs once they're deployed. I personally am not going to deploy any public IP addresses, since I will be accessing these VMs over either over the public internet, or you can do it through like a VPN. We'll show you how all that works out under cover. So once this is all done, so you don't actually need to deploy a public IP in order to access this. The Windows Virtual Desktop infrastructure will handle exposing it out to the internet via gateway and other pieces that it does and manages for you, so you don't have to worry about those pieces. All right, next up, you can select if you want to apply a network security group to the systems or not. Or you can say none. So in that case, if the VNet or virtual network that you're associating with already have a network security group assigned to it, the VMs that you deploy in the network will just automatically inherit those rules. So you can just say no, none there in that case. If this is a brand new virtual network, then you may want to allow the basic or the advanced. It just depends on what your needs are. I'm going to go with none. Next up, you have an option to specify the domain, or like the OU where you want the VMs to end up at once they join. So here you can specify the domain to join. You just type that in there, whatever your domain is. And then optionally, again, you can specify the OU that you want the virtual machines to be in once they join your domain. So another use case for this option would be if you have like multiple domains where you want you're joining like one domain, but your admin account is like in a separate domain. That may be a case where you would specify one domain here, but for your AD domain join piece, you may specify a different domain down there. It just depends on how your setup is. Since mine is one and the same, I'm going to just say no here. I don't need that customization right now, and I may later move my system into the appropriate OU, just depending on what my needs are as time goes on. And then as I get down here, I need to specify pretty much a admin account that can join the system to the domain once they come online. So in my environment, I have a join domain account. Just go ahead and type that in. Then I have to put in my username and password. And then go next. And now we need to register Workspace. So you can do that now or later. So I'm going to actually just go ahead and allow it to do it now. So I'll just say yes. And you see here, I already have a few different pools or workspaces already defined. But at this time, I could create a new one as well. Or like I mentioned, I can have them just join one of these existing ones. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to go with, just allow it to join that one. I go next. And then here we have options for using tags. So tags is a good way to, for doing like chargeback internally, you may want to tag your various different resources with, so say if you say environment, dev, and maybe department, finance, or whatever the department is that will be consuming these resources. So later, using things like Azure Cost Management and various different reporting mechanisms, you can see, okay, these VMs that we had running for X amount of time was consume X amount of dollars, and then we can charge back to those groups internally. So you can use it for other purposes, but that's kind of one of the most common cases for tagging. So I'll just go with that. So we'll go next. Then it will just briefly go through and review and validate if everything that I checked there is okay. And then when I'm ready, I'll just simply click create, and that'll go off and kick off that template to create my new environment. So after my environment has been created, it's going to take several minutes. It's because what's going to happen in the background is going to spin up some infrastructures to allow you to access those virtual machines once they're created. So it's going to go up and spin the virtual machines up. It's going to power them up. It's going to actually join them to your domain. It's going to actually configure up everything else that it needs to talk to the WVD service, and then it's going to make them available within the host pool, application groups, as well as the workspaces that you define. So let's go take a look at our host pool. So if I go look in my environment here, see I have actually two host pools that are defined within the environment. So I have LTV primary pool and I have LTV WVD. You can see both of them reside in North Central US, and they're both using the breadth first load balancing algorithm that we talked about, and they're both also using the pool host pool type. So let's go ahead and dive into LTV primary pool. And as you see here on the overview screen, we kind of see those similar things that we already defined. So we see we see kind of the resource group we're in. So this particular one is actually in LTV WVD new. And we see the size of our virtual machines. We can see our subscription ID, subscription, and then down here at the bottom we can see, okay, we have a total of 2 hosts. Right now there's total of no active sessions on those hosts, and then we can see right now both of those hosts are currently unavailable. The reason for that, both of those virtual machines are actually powered off right now. Actually, after they were provisioning everything, I actually powered them off. So I'll need to power them back on to make them available for the service and available for users to log into them. So let's continue going down. We take a look at our properties. And directly here in line, we can see some various different properties on our system. So you see this max session limit has been changed to 50. Made a few more changes on here. And again, if we wanted to change that load balancing algorithm, we can do it directly here, right in the Azure portal. Prior, in a lot of cases, if you want to change any of these settings, you would have to either do it through PowerShell or through that secondary application, web application that you would have to deploy and manage yourself into like a Windows app server, Azure app service, or some other mechanism to host that application. So you no longer have that dependency here. So we'll go take a look at our application groups. So in our application groups, I have one defined. So you have desktop application groups, and then you also have remote app application groups. The main difference between the two, obviously, is the desktop application group will actually, when the user log in, they will get presented with the entire desktop, and then they can launch whatever applications are available on that particular host. And in the case of the remote app application groups, instead of the user being loaded into a full desktop environment, just the particular app that they want to run will be virtualized and brought to their system locally. It's where the experience will look very similar to like running a local app on their system. And then we go ahead over to session hosts. So as I already mentioned, both of these session hosts are currently offline. But as you can see, how it named the LTV-WVDN, and then it tagged the -0 on the end for the first one, and then a -1 for the second one. And if I were to create additional VMs using the same naming convention, the next one will be -2, -3, etc. down the line as I create additional ones. All right, and then you have some other details here as far as active sessions. So nobody is on any of these right now, obviously. So next thing you can do is with all of these various different resources, they are inheriting like the native Azure Diagnostic Setting capability. So for any of these various different, like the host pools, application group, workspaces, I can enable diagnostic settings. So in the case of the session hosts that I'm looking at now, or host pools, I can say add diagnostic settings. Say if I want to add this, so I can go and stream like checkpoint error management, connection, and host registration log entries to either log analytics, to a storage account, or stream it over to Event Hub. So right now I'm not going to enable any of that, so I'm just go ahead and discard that. Just wanted to show you that that's some of the things that are available. Let's go ahead and hop back over to our main screen here. So let's go over to our application groups. And then similarly here, we see our various different properties. So not much to change here. You can give it a different friendly name or a different description, but other than that, there's not much to tweak or change in the properties here. I go to assignments. So here, this is where you define the end users that's going to be granted access into the environment. And so with this, it's going to be a user that you have already synced from your on-prem Azure environment. Well, that correction. Your on-prem Active Directory environment, and those accounts have been synced to Azure AD, and then you can leverage those accounts or groups to grant permissions to the service. So if I click add here, I get presented with various different users that are available within my environment. I can go and select those systems. So I'm just going to go ahead and select my CS Help Desk. Actually, no, I don't want to use that one. Let's see. Who do I want to use? Let's say I want to add my network controller admins to grant them access to this. Say select. And then just as easy as that, now they're assigned permissions to that particular application group. All right. So now let's go check out Workspaces. Go to our Workspaces. We have that workspace name Pool Primary WS. And let's go to Properties. So you see here, again, it's not much here. I can type an additional friendly name if I wanted to. I can type a description, but other than that, there's not much additional details available in the properties. Go over to our application group. Then we can see which application groups are associated with this workspace. So you can have multiple application groups associated with a single workspace. So say if you have, you want to have a workspace that's maybe shared among different user types, and they can be presented with all of those particular apps, be it a full desktop or individual remote apps can be presented in a single view. So in this case, I'm just going to dive into one of these here. Again, check out our properties, not much to see. We see our assignment. So in this one, nobody has been assigned to this particular one. When I go back to my primary pool and go to assignments again, we can see that change that we just saw in the previous screen. So we're just seeing the same thing, just from, we're getting to it from the workspace directly side, because the workspaces have a relationship with the application groups, and then the application groups are hosted on a particular host pool. So all these three primary or main objects have an interrelationship with each other. All right, so now all of that is all up and going. So now what I need to do, I need to just hop back over to my portal, and I'm going to go to my virtual machine session. I'm just going to go ahead and power back up some of my VMs. So those two ones that we deployed, I'm just going to go and turn those back on. So now that our virtual machines are running, we'll hop back over to the Windows Virtual Desktop section, and we're going to go into our host pools. So now we go to our host pool. We're going to go back to our LTV primary pool. And then now we see we have 2 session hosts, and none are unavailable. So that means that those 2 session hosts, they're now up and running, they're connected to the service, and they're now actually available to accept end users to connect. So how do you connect? You have a couple different options. So let's show you some of that. So if you go back to the overview section, it'll show you some additional information as far as you can go and read how to get started, and how to talk about how to create profiles and look at various different cost calculators. But you see, it doesn't really say anything about how to connect. So how do you do that? So there is a new, relatively new, remote desktop client that's available. So that would be one of the options. An additional option would be to connect via the HTML5 client, which is actually hosted on a web page. So let's show you that option. So in your browser, what you want to do, you can gonna go over and take a look at this article here. So as I mentioned previously, there was a different way how Windows Virtual Desktop was deployed, and as such, there was actually a different client that you would connect to, depending on if you deploy in the fall 2019 release, before ARM integration was fully complete, or if you're deploying this new wizard that I just showed you through this whole session up to this point, you're going to use this new URL that's published here. So you're going to go to rdweb.wvd.microsoft.com/arm/web client. Again, you want to use a /arm/web client. If you go to the /web client, that will actually connect you to the earlier release of WVD before ARM integration was fully done. And even right now, I guess it's technically not fully done. The service is, many pieces and aspects of the service is still in preview, so just keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and jump over to our ARM web client. And then that will prompt you to log in. So you'll either add another account if you're not currently logged in with the account you want to use. If you are, you'll just go ahead and click on that. All right. So now I'm actually logged in to the service. So you see I'm being presented with whatever applications and remote desktops that I've been provisioned access to. In this case, I just have access to the one that's provisioned under pool-primary WS, and I can see that session desktop option. So I go ahead and click on that. I get a few options to say, do I want to allow it to access local resources, such as like copy and paste with the clipboard? Do I want to get it access to printers? I'm going to go ahead and say allow. And then let's go ahead and try to launch a session to there. So in the background, it's going to go and talk to essentially a remote desktop connection broker that's actually hosted by Microsoft on our behalf to allow us to connect to our service. And in this case, I didn't get the single sign-on experience, and I think that has to do with the computer that I'm actually working from now is not on that domain, that same domain. I believe if I was on the system on that same domain as that user account, and I'm logged in as that user account already, I may have experienced like a single sign-on experience. So here I'm just going to have to put in my username and password again. And let's go ahead and log in. And it's booting up. Almost there. It's loading my personalized settings. And within a few moments, I should be presented with my desktop, and I can fully start working within the environment. I didn't have to install any additional like client or anything on my system. I simply can go to that web page, log in with my domain account that's been granted permissions, and then I'm off to the races, ready to leverage and use the services. So here we are. See, I'm on the system. See, as I selected the Windows 10 with Office 365 Pro Plus, I can see that Office is already installed on this image. And if I go into my settings and go to System, and then if I go to About, in this view here, I can see that I'm actually am on WVDN-1. It's actually the host that it sent me to. So it didn't send me to 0. It actually sent me to 1 when I initially connected. So your mileage may vary. It's going to try to randomize the connections and things like that as it go on and distribute that user load across the available nodes that you have. See, it's Windows 10 Enterprise for Virtual Desktop. It's the edition, and it's running version 1909. So all very good stuff. Alright, so let's go ahead and hop back over to our main portal. So let's go take a look at host pools again. We go to our primary pool. And now we see the data here has been updated. Now I can see total active session of 1. So it realized that, hey, yeah, there's someone logged into that host now. And if I go into application group, I can see that. So I can see there's 3 users that are defined that's on there now. If I go to session host, again, I can see exactly which session host that user is on. So I can see there's 1 active session on there. If I drill down a little bit deeper, I can see exactly what user is actually logged on there. So I can see my user account that's there. And then with that user, I can actually go and send them a message. I can actually log them off. I can change the drain mode for the system. So say if I want to take the system down for maintenance of some type, I can change the drain mode to not allow any new connections to the system. So anyone that's on won't immediately be kicked off, but new users won't be allowed to connect. And then once they're all off, I can take that host down, patch it, reboot it, do anything I need, and then put it back in production. So for this user, I'm actually going to send them a message. Let's say, yes, hi, from the other side. Yes. Say okay. And if we go back to our session client, there we go. We see that message we just sent. We see hi from the other side test. So hopefully this has been useful for you. This is a greatly simplified method for deploying Windows Virtual Desktop. It has added additional capabilities to expand it out, but a lot easier than it was in the past with the previous earlier release. So happy desktoping. See you in the next one.